The valley had seemed quiet. Too quiet. Lieutenant Marcus Drake should have known better. Now his six-man SEAL team was pinned down in a narrow Afghan ravine, taking fire from 3 positions at once. Muzzle flashes sparked from the ridgeline to the north. More came from a cluster of boulders to the east. A third group had them bracketed from the high ground to the west. They'd walked straight into a kill zone, and the Taliban had waited until the perfect moment to spring it. Contact left. Contact right. The shouts came over the radio, voices tight with adrenaline. Rounds snapped overhead, cracking against the rocks. Dust and stone fragments exploded around them. Drake pressed himself against a boulder, breathing hard, his mind racing through options that were rapidly running out. His radio man, Petty Officer Chen, was already calling it in. Widow 7. This is Trident 1-6. Troops in contact, requesting immediate air support. An RPG shrieked past, detonating 30 meters behind them in a shower of dirt and shrapnel. Chen's voice never wavered. Multiple enemy positions, danger close. The response crackled back through static. Trident 1-6, Widow 7. Closest air is 20 minutes out. Hold tight. 20 minutes. Drake's jaw clenched. In a firefight like this, 20 minutes was a lifetime. One of his men, Rodriguez, was already down, leg torn open by shrapnel, bleeding through the tourniquet his swim buddy had slapped on. Another SEAL, Kowalski, had taken a round through his plate carrier. The ceramic had stopped it, but he was moving slower now, ribs probably cracked. The daylight was dying. Shadows stretched long across the valley floor. If they were still here when full darkness hit, the enemy would own the night. Drake scanned the terrain, looking for anything, a drainage ditch, a dead space, some angle they could use to break contact. Nothing. The Taliban had chosen this ground well. Then something changed. One of the shooters on the northern ridgeline jerked backward and disappeared. No sound. No warning. Just gone. Drake's head snapped up. Did you see that? Before anyone could answer, a second Taliban fighter dropped, this one from the eastern position. He'd been repositioning behind a rock, and then he simply crumpled, his weapon clattering down the slope. The incoming fire slackened. Confusion rippled through the enemy positions. Drake could hear shouting in Pashto, frantic and disorganized. A third shooter fell, then a fourth. What the hell? Kowalski muttered, risking a glance over the rock. Is that A support? Negative, Chen said, checking his radio. Birds are still 15 minutes out. But someone was out there. Someone with a rifle and a very specific skill set. The shots were impossibly precise, coming from a distance and angle that shouldn't have been possible given the terrain. Drake scanned the ridgeline to the south, the only high ground not occupied by Taliban fighters. His mind caught up to what his eyes were seeing. The Overwatch position. 800 meters out, maybe more. Another enemy fighter went down. Clinical. Professional. One shot. One kill. Drake's heart was still hammering, but for the first time in the last 5 minutes, he felt something other than dread. Someone was covering them. Someone they hadn't counted on. Someone he'd barely thought about since the mission brief 2 days ago. His eyes narrowed as he stared at that distant ridgeline. Who the hell is that? 48 hours earlier, the briefing room at Forward Operating Base Arlana was packed with the kind of energy that only SEALs brought to a mission. Lieutenant Marcus Drake stood at the front, pointer in hand, tactical map glowing on the screen behind him. His team sat in folding chairs, 6 of the best operators in theater, lean and confident, already mentally rehearsing the hit. Staff Sergeant Maya Cross sat in the back corner. She'd arrived that morning on a Chinook from Camp Leatherneck. Her orders simple: provide overwatch and logistics coordination for a joint operation. The paperwork said support personnel. That's all anyone needed to know, apparently. When she'd walked into the briefing room with her gear bag slung over one shoulder, Drake had glanced up, nodded once, and gone back to his map. No handshake, no introduction to the team, just a nod. Maya was used to it. She was 32, compact and weathered in the way that came from years in the sun and sand. Her uniform was faded in places, her boots scuffed and broken in. The rifle case leaning against her chair was older than some of the men in the room, a battered M40A5 that had seen more deployments than most Marines would in a career. There were scratches along the stock, worn spots where her hands had gripped it 1,000 times. If anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed the unit marking near the trigger guard, faded almost to nothing. No one looked closely. Drake's brief was efficient. The target was a mid-level Taliban commander operating out of a compound in the Tangi Valley. Standard capture or kill. The SEALs would insert at dawn, move to the compound, clear it, and extract before the heat of the day set in. Clean. Simple. The kind of op they could do in their sleep. Support element will establish overwatch here, Drake said, tapping a ridgeline south of the objective. He didn't look at Maya when he said it. Stay on the high ground. Call out if you see anything. We'll handle the heavy lifting. One of the youngest SEALs, Petty Officer Greer, maybe 25 and fresh off his third deployment, leaned over to his buddy. The words were quiet, but not quiet enough. Didn't know we were babysitting. Another SEAL smirked. Hope she can keep up. Maya didn't react. She kept her eyes on the map, memorizing terrain features, calculating distances and angles. The compound sat in a narrow valley with ridgelines on 3 sides. Choke points. Limited egress routes. Her mind was already working through contingencies that weren't on Drake's PowerPoint. Greer spoke up, louder this time. So, just to clarify, why are we bringing support personnel on an op like this? He glanced back at Maya. No offense, but this is a direct action mission. He caught himself, but the pause said everything. What's support gonna do besides slow us down? Drake's expression tightened, but his answer was diplomatic. Staff Sergeant Cross is here because Haya wanted an additional set of eyes. That's the call. She stays out of the way. We do our job. Everyone goes home. He turned back to the map. Any other questions that matter? The room went quiet. Maya said nothing. She never did in these situations. Instead, she leaned down and unzipped her rifle case, pulling out the M40A5 with the same care some men reserve for family heirlooms. She checked the scope, ran her hand along the barrel, inspected the bolt. The movements were automatic, precise. Muscle memory from too many missions to count. If anyone had been paying attention, they might have noticed things. The way she moved, economical, no wasted motion. The faded patch on her shoulder, worn almost smooth from years of Velcro and sun. The instinctive way her eyes tracked to the terrain photos on the screen, reading elevation and dead space like a second language. But no one was paying attention. To them, she was a checkbox, a bureaucratic requirement. Support means stay out of the way. The briefing ended. The SEALs stood, clapping each other on the back, talking through equipment checks and last-minute details. Maya slung her rifle, shouldered her pack, and walked out into the Afghan dawn. The air was already heating up, dust swirling across the gravel. At 0500 hours, the convoy rolled out. 4 vehicles, 3 carrying SEALs, 1 carrying Maya and a young Army private assigned as her spotter. She sat in the back, quiet and still, watching the mountains rise in the distance. Alone. Dismissed. Exactly where she'd always done her best work. The insertion went perfectly. 2 Black Hawks dropped the SEAL team into the valley just after 0430, rotors thumping in the darkness before banking away and disappearing over the ridgeline. Drake's team moved like shadows, spaced and silent, weapons up. They had 2 clicks to cover before dawn broke, and they were making good time. Maya had arrived earlier, driven in with her spotter, Private First Class Daniels, a 20-year-old kid from Wisconsin who'd been told to carry her gear and keep his mouth shut. They'd climbed to the overwatch position in darkness, 800 meters south of the target compound, and settled into a hide among the rocks. By the time the SEALs began their approach, Maya was already glassing the valley through her scope. The compound sat below them, a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by a low wall. Standard layout. 2 goats tied near the entrance. A motorcycle leaning against the outer wall. Everything matched the reconnaissance photos. But something felt wrong. Maya adjusted her scope, scanning the terrain. There, fresh tire tracks in the dirt near the dried riverbed, heading away from the compound. Not old. Recent. She shifted her view to the tree line on the eastern edge of the valley. The branches were disturbed, broken in a way that didn't match wind patterns. Her gaze moved to the rock fall on the northern ridge. Too much cleared space. Fighting positions. Maybe. Hastily prepared, but effective. Her instinct screamed ambush. She keyed her radio. Actual, this is Overwatch. Drake's voice came back, professional and clipped. Send it. I'm seeing secondary positions. Disturbed earth near the tree line, possible fighting positions on the north ridge. Fresh vehicle tracks heading out. This might be more than a single target. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Recommend you hold and reassess. There was a beat of silence. When Drake responded, his tone had cooled. Copy, Overwatch. We're proceeding. Keep your lane. Maya's jaw tightened. She glanced at Daniels, who was watching her with wide eyes. The kid had heard it too. The dismissal. She pressed her eye back to the scope, tracking the SEALs as they moved closer to the compound. 200 meters out now. 150. Stay sharp, she murmured to Daniels. This is about to go bad. It went bad fast. The SEALs were 70 meters from the compound when the world exploded. Muzzle flashes erupted from three sides at once. The rock fall, the tree line, the dried riverbed. The compound hadn't been a target. It had been bait. Contact. Contact left. Drake's voice burst over the radio, no longer calm. We're in a kill zone. Through her scope, Maya watched it unfold like a nightmare in high definition. Rodriguez went down first, his leg blown out by machine gun fire. Kowalski took shrapnel when an RPG detonated against a boulder 10 feet from him. The SEALs scrambled for cover, returning fire, but they were pinned. Outgunned. Exposed. Drake was calling for air support. Maya already knew the answer. 20 minutes minimum. She'd heard it 100 times before on 100 other missions. 20 minutes was a lifetime. She didn't wait for orders. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. Decades of training took over, shutting out everything except what she could see through the glass. She began identifying threats, prioritizing targets the way her instructors had drilled into her at Camp Lejeune a lifetime ago. Northern Ridge, PKM gunner repositioning behind rocks, trying to flank the SEAL position. 920 meters. Wind, 3 to 5 knots left to right. Tree line, RPG team setting up for another shot. Drake's team was clustered too tight. A direct hit would be catastrophic. 840 meters. Dried riverbed, Taliban commander, easy to spot by the way the other fighters kept glancing at him for direction. He was coordinating the ambush, turning chaos into something surgical. 915 meters. These weren't shots the SEALs could take. They were suppressed, bleeding, fighting just to stay alive. But these were the shots Maya had been trained for. Shots that required patience, windage calculation, breath control, and a skill set earned over 8 deployments that nobody in that valley knew she had. Daniels was staring at her, waiting. Maya made her decision. Protocol said wait for orders. Protocol said stay in your lane. Protocol would get those men killed. She dialed the elevation knob on her scope. Checked the wind flags one more time. Settled the crosshairs on the PKM gunner, center mass, just above his chest rig. He was moving, setting up to pour fire into Drake's exposed flank. Maya exhaled slowly, found the space between heartbeats, and squeezed. The PKM gunner dropped like someone had cut his strings. He'd been mid-crouch, repositioning to rake the SEALs with enfilade fire, and then he simply wasn't there anymore. His weapon clattered down the rocks, end over end, until it wedged between two boulders. Maya was already transitioning. She worked the bolt, smooth, automatic, the muscle memory of 10,000 repetitions. Brass ejected, glinting in the early light. A fresh round chambered. She didn't watch the PKM gunner fall. Dead men didn't matter. The next threat did. Tree line. RPG team. The loader was crouched behind a fallen tree, prepping another rocket. The gunner was sighting in on Drake's position. 5 seconds, maybe less, before that rocket turned the SEAL's cover into shrapnel and dust. Maya adjusted for distance. 840 meters. Wind had shifted, now 4 knots, quartering left. She compensated, led the target slightly as the gunner rose to fire. Exhale. Pause. Squeeze. The gunner collapsed backward. The RPG tumbled from his hands and fired. His loader stared for half a second, confused, before Maya's next round found him too. 2 shots. 2 dead. The rocket threat was gone. Down in the valley, the SEALs were still pinned, but something had changed. The incoming fire had slackened. Drake risked a glance over his boulder, trying to understand what was happening. The enemy positions were still there, but fewer muzzle flashes. Fewer voices shouting commands. Are they pulling back? Kowalski asked, breathing hard through cracked ribs. Maybe repositioning, Drake said, but his voice carried doubt. Greer, the cocky SEAL who'd questioned Maya's presence 2 days ago, scanned the sky. Did air support get here early? Negative, Chen confirmed, ear pressed to his radio. Still 12 minutes out. But the killing continued. Methodical. Invisible. Maya had found her rhythm now. Sight picture, wind call, breath control, trigger press. Each shot was a calculus problem solved in seconds. Distance, wind, gravity, target movement. Her rifle, battered, scarred, older than half the weapons in theater, performed like the precision instrument it was. She didn't think about the men in the valley who dismissed her. She didn't think about proving anything to anyone. She thought about angles, about breath, about Staff Sergeant Hicks, her instructor at sniper school, who'd stood behind her on the range at Quantico and said, "The best sniper is the one the enemy never knows is there. You're not a gunfighter, Cross. You're a ghost." Sweat ran down her temple. The sun was climbing now, heating the rocks around her hide. Brass casings accumulated beside her right knee. 4, 6, 8. Each one represented a decision. A life ended from nearly a kilometer away. "Adjust right. .2 mils, Daniels whispered beside her. The young private had his spotting scope pressed to his eye, reading the mirage and wind shifts. He was learning fast, feeding her corrections without being asked. Target, dried riverbed. Taliban commander, 915 meters. Maya found him in her scope. The commander was older, bearded, gesturing to his fighters with sharp, angry movements. He was trying to regain control of the ambush, shouting orders, repositioning his men. He hadn't realized yet that his fighters weren't just taking cover. They were dying. She centered the crosshairs on his chest. Squeezed. The commander dropped mid-sentence, his hands still raised in command. The fighters nearest him froze, the discipline fracturing. Some dove for cover. Others began shooting wildly, unsure where the threat was coming from. Maya shifted to the northern ridge. A sniper had been positioning himself among the rocks, trying to draw a bead on the SEALs below. She could see the profile of his rifle, the shape of his shoulders. He was good, patient, disciplined, waiting for the right shot. She didn't give him the chance. The sniper slumped forward over his weapon, motionless. Down in the kill zone, the SEALs were beginning to maneuver. With the enemy fire reduced to sporadic bursts, Drake seized the opportunity. Move! Get Rodriguez to cover. 2 SEALs grabbed their wounded teammate, dragging him toward better ground. Another provided covering fire, though there was less and less to cover against. Drake's voice came over the radio, tight and confused. "Cross, what's your sit rep?" Maya's response was calm, almost flat. "Overwatch is clay. Threats neutralized." There was a pause. Static crackled. "Say again. What threats?" 12 tangos down. She chambered another round, scanning for remaining targets. "You're clear to extract." The pause was longer this time. Maya could almost hear Drake trying to process it. She watched him through her scope, saw him lower his rifle, saw him look around at the enemy positions that had gone quiet, saw him turn and stare up at the ridgeline where she'd been positioned all along. 800 meters away. Nearly a kilometer. 12 confirmed kills in less than 4 minutes. Under fire. In wind. At distances most shooters wouldn't attempt with a cold bore and all day to set up. That wasn't support personnel. That wasn't logistics coordination. That wasn't someone you ignored in a briefing and told to stay in their lane. Drake's voice came back over the radio, quieter now. "Different. Copy that. Overwatch. Good shooting." Maya didn't respond. She was already scanning for stragglers, for one last fighter who might have courage or stupidity enough to take another shot. But the valley had gone still. The Taliban who could run were running. The ones who couldn't were past caring. Daniels was staring at her, eyes wide with something between shock and reverence. Holy shit, Staff Sergeant. Maya ejected the final brass casing and saved her rifle. 12 rounds. 12 hits. The math was simple, even if nothing else about the last 4 minutes had been. She keyed her radio one last time. Overwatch is relocating to extract point. Out. Then she stood, slinging her rifle, and began the long climb down from the ridge. The extraction birds came in low and fast, rotors beating the air into submission. 2 Black Hawks settling onto the valley floor in clouds of dust and rotor wash. The wounded went up first. Rodriguez on a stretcher, face pale but conscious, Kowalski moving under his own power but favoring his ribs. The rest of the team followed, exhausted and shaken but alive. Maya climbed down from her Overwatch position as the helicopters touched down, rifle slung across her back, face streaked with dust and sweat. She said nothing as she approached the landing zone. Didn't need to. The work spoke for itself. Greer, the cocky SEAL who'd questioned her presence 48 hours ago, stood near the bird's open door. When Maya passed, he turned his head, staring hard at the ground. Couldn't meet her eyes. Didn't even try. Drake was the one who stepped forward. He'd been talking to his radio man, coordinating the extract, but when Maya approached he went quiet. For the first time since she'd arrived at FOB Salerno, he really looked at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. His eyes moved from her face to the rifle, the battered M40A5 that had seemed so out of place in a briefing room full of modern weapons. Then to her shoulder, where the patch she wore had been faded nearly smooth by years of Velcro and sun and sand. Staff Sergeant, Drake said slowly, his voice carrying over the rotor noise. Those shots, some of those were over 900 meters. In wind. Under fire. Maya nodded once. Yes, sir. Drake shook his head, and something like disbelief crossed his face. Not the dismissive kind. The humbled kind. I need to know. Who the hell are you? She hesitated, not because she was ashamed, not because she needed the recognition, but because some things didn't need to be said out loud. Still, he'd asked, and after what had just happened, he'd earned an answer. Maya rotated her shoulders slightly, just enough for Drake to see the patch clearly in the harsh Afghan sunlight. Marine Corps Scout Sniper insignia, worn and faded, and beneath it, a small tab that most people wouldn't recognize, 0317, Hog's Tooth. Drake's eyes widened. He knew. Every operator in the community knew what that meant. The Hog's Tooth wasn't given. It was earned. Blood, sweat, and proven kills. The mark of a sniper who'd done the work when it mattered most. How many deployments? He asked quietly. 8. Maya's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. Fallujah. Ramadi. Helmand. Marja. Twice in Sanjan. Drake waited. There was more. He could sense it. 324 confirmed, sir. She paused, just for a beat. Before today. The rotor noise seemed to fade into the background. The SEAL team had gone quiet, listening. Every one of them understood what those numbers meant. 324 confirmed kills. 8 deployments in the worst places the war had to offer. And they treated her like a checkbox. Like an inconvenience. Drake extended his hand. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of genuine respect. I owe you an apology, Staff Sergeant. We all do. Maya shook his hand. Her grip was firm, calloused, the hand of someone who'd spent years behind a rifle. You don't owe me anything, Lieutenant. You just owe it to your team to come home. That's the job. One of the SEALs stepped forward, the younger one, the operator whose flank had been exposed when the PKM gunner was lining up his kill shot. He looked at Maya like he was seeing her for the first time. That gunner on the North Ridge, he had me dead to rights. I didn't even see him. Maya met his eyes. There was no judgment there, no smugness, just the quiet acknowledgement of one professional to another. That's why I was there. The SEAL nodded slowly. No words needed. He understood now. Drake glanced at his team, then back at Maya. The reversal was complete. The woman they dismissed as support personnel, the Marine they'd barely acknowledged in the briefing room, the sniper they'd told to stay in her lane. She'd just saved every one of their lives from a position they couldn't see, with shots they couldn't make, using skills they'd never bothered to ask about. She'd never needed the spotlight, never needed the recognition. She just needed the mission. And when it mattered most, when 12 Taliban fighters had his team in a kill zone and A support was still 10 minutes out, she'd done the work. Quiet, professional, lethal, exactly the way she'd been trained. Word spread through FOB Salerno the way it always did, fast and impossible to contain. By the time the helicopters touched down and the team offloaded, half the base already knew. A Marine sniper had pulled a SEAL team out of a kill zone with 12 confirmed kills at distances most shooters wouldn't attempt on a flat range with no wind and all day to set up. The SEAL team didn't exaggerate. They didn't need to. The after-action report said it all. 12 enemy combatants neutralized. 0 friendly KIA. A team brought home alive because someone they dismissed had done the job they never saw coming. Maya didn't seek recognition. She never had. She cleaned her rifle in the armory, breaking it down with the same methodical care she'd shown for years. She filed her report, brief, factual, devoid of emotion. She restocked her ammunition, checked her gear, and prepared for whatever came next. That was the job. That's all it had ever been. But things had changed. When she walked through the chow hall that evening, conversations paused. Heads turned, not with curiosity or dismissal this time, but with something else. Respect. The kind that couldn't be issued or awarded. The kind that had to be earned in blood and gunpowder and impossible shots under fire. A group of Army Rangers nodded as she passed. A Navy corpsman stepped aside to let her through, meeting her eyes with quiet acknowledgement. Even the base commander, a Marine colonel who'd been in country for 6 months, stopped her near the exit. Heard about the valley, Staff Sergeant. Good work. Maya nodded. Thank you, sir. That was all. No speeches. No ceremony. Just the quiet recognition that mattered most in a place like this. Drake found her later that night outside the operations center, sitting on a concrete barrier and staring at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. He approached carefully, like someone who'd learned not to make assumptions. Staff Sergeant, he said, I want to put you in for a commendation. Bronze Star. Maybe. What you did out there. Maya shook her head before he could finish. So, I didn't do it for a medal. Her voice was quiet but firm. I did it because there's someone's son, someone's husband, someone's father. That's enough. Drake studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He understood now. Some people didn't do the work for recognition. They did it because it needed to be done, and they were the ones who could do it. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. For the briefing. For not asking. For. It's forgotten, Lieutenant. Maya stood, slinging her rifle. Just bring your team home next time. That's all I ask. Drake extended his hand again, and this time the respect in the gesture was earned on both sides. Semper Fi, Staff Sergeant. Hooyah, sir, she replied with the faintest hint of a smile. The next morning, Greer found her at the clearing barrels outside the armory. The young SEAL stood awkwardly for a moment, clearly rehearsing words he wasn't used to saying. Staff Sergeant, he stopped, started again. I was wrong. What I said in the briefing. The attitude. All of it. You saved my life out there, and I didn't even know your name. He met her eyes. I'm sorry. Maya accepted it the way she'd accepted Drake's apology, with grace, without making him feel smaller than he already did. You're good, petty officer. Just remember, next time someone walks into a briefing room and doesn't look like what you expect a warrior to look like. Greer nodded. I will. I promise. She believed him, because that's how things changed in places like this. Not with speeches or policies, but with moments. With 12 impossible shots in a valley halfway around the world. With lives saved by someone no one had bothered to see. There are warriors the world celebrates. The ones on magazine covers, the ones with stories told and retold. And then there are the others. The snipers on distant ridges. The support teams in the shadows. The quiet professionals who do the work without the glory, without the recognition, without ever asking for anything except the chance to bring their people home. They don't seek the spotlight. They never have. They're the ones who show up, do the job, and disappear back into the background while others take the credit. And that's exactly how they want it. Because the most dangerous people in the world aren't the ones who announce themselves. They're the ones you never see coming, until the moment you needed them most. If you've ever served alongside someone like Maya, someone who was underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked, and then proved everyone wrong when it mattered most, drop a comment below. Share their story. Honor the quiet professionals who never asked for recognition but earned every ounce of respect they received. And if you've ever been that person yourself, know this: the people who matter saw you. They always did. Because true strength doesn't need an audience. It just needs a mission.